After several years of being dragged through the mud, Doctor Who seemed to be gaining some of its dignity back in the early 1990s. While Season 27 didn't make too much of a splash, Season 28, with its new faces in front and behind the camera, was able to leave a positive impression on those who tuned in. With the success of Season 28 on their shoulders, the Doctor Who production office swung into action for Season 29, with the goal of proving that Season 28 wasn't a one-hit wonder. Season 29 of Doctor Who would have starred Richard Griffiths as the 8th Doctor, along with Julia Ormond as Rain Cunningham and Mark Greenstreet as Higgs. It would also see Ian Fraser acting as producer with Ben Aronovich as script editor. After the success of Season 28, and with a more comfortable production team, work on Season 29 quickly commenced. The production team looked back at what worked in Season 28 and decided to run with it, whilst also trying to fix what didn't work. Following on from Season 28's Lung Barrow, which left some audience members baffled, the team decided it would be best to move on from any lingering ideas from the fan-titled Cartmel Master Plan and focus on stories that, whilst maybe including elements from the show's past, won't leave viewers, who maybe hadn't seen those episodes, completely out of the loop. Between seasons, the BBC decided to move the show from the Wednesday night slot, which Doctor Who had been a part of for several years now, back to its traditional Saturday night slot. Lastly, as mentioned in Season 28, this season would see the 8th Doctor now spouting a full beard, rather than a goatee, as Fraser and the production team absolutely loved the look of the 8th Doctor with a beard. Season 29 would air between the 5th of September 1992 and the 5th of December 1992. It would consist of 14 episodes across 4 stories, with 2 3-parters and 2 4-parters, and would go out weekly on Saturday night. This story sees the TARDIS being dragged into a parallel universe and landing on Earth in the 11th century. Upon arriving, the Doctor tries to leave, only to discover that the TARDIS has been drained of its power and will need time to recharge. We then see the Doctor, Rain and Higgs exploring this parallel Earth while looking for something that will help accelerate the TARDIS's recharging. However, things take a turn for the worse when the Doctor is mistaken for a sorcerer and is sentenced to death. The Doctor then realises that something bigger is going on, something that concerns his own past, as he finds himself confronted with none other than Morgaine and her son Mordred. That's when the Doctor realises what's about to happen. The Doctor realises that now is the time he must become Merlin and banish Morgaine from this universe in order for his younger self to do battle with her and the Destroyer in the future. This story acts as a sequel to Season 26's Battlefield, with the Doctor essentially setting up the events of that story, as well as acting out events which he'd only heard about in the past, such as becoming Merlin, fighting alongside King Arthur, and setting things in place for his previous incarnation to deal with. We would also see Rain becoming a part of the established story, with her becoming the Lady of the Lake, and Higgs doing battle with Anselin against the Destroyer. At the end of the story, the Doctor fulfills his destiny, and everything is set in place for Morgaine's return. She and the Destroyer are defeated, Anselin has been told to be prepared to encounter the Doctor's younger self, and King Arthur is dead. The trio say their farewells and, with the TARDIS now fully recharged, return to their correct universe. This story sees the Doctor, Rain and Higgs arriving in America in the year 1892. However, the trio quickly realise that something is seriously wrong with time. The country possesses technology and weapons which are several decades ahead of its time, as well as most, if not all people, are British, and America isn't called America, but instead West Britannia. Through some research, the Doctor deduces that someone or something has interfered with history, changing the outcome of the Revolutionary War, resulting in the British winning and America never being founded. With history needing to be corrected, the Doctor uses the TARDIS to take them to the year 1776, which the TARDIS has detected as the most likely moment where history was set on a different path. However, upon arriving in 1776, the trio were caught in some crossfire and taken prisoner by the American army. The Doctor is then taken to one of the American leaders, who, to the Doctor's horror, is none other than the Master. It turns out that the Master is responsible for altering the timelines. We learn that, through hypnosis, the Master has made himself a leader for the American army, whilst also replacing George III with an android duplicate. He plans to manipulate both armies into a position where American resources are dropped significantly, as well as giving the British the advantage they need to take down the opposition and win history. The story sees the trio escaping the Master's captive and working with the British army in order to keep history on its correct path, as well as finding a way to get rid of the Master. The Doctor is eventually able to find and rescue the real King George, who was being held prisoner by the Master, and shuts down the android duplicate. The Doctor then discovers that the android contained an inbuilt perception filter which prevented anyone from ever questioning him. He then uses this perception filter to interfere with the Masters, which exposes him to the Americans. At the end of the story, the Masters' plans are foiled and history continues with America winning the Revolutionary War. We then end with the Master being hunted down by the Americans and the Doctor and the companions returning to the TARDIS before they get caught in the crossfire. This story sees the TARDIS arriving in the fictional village of Crook Marsham in the year 1968, with the Doctor appearing to be in a pensive mood and reconsidering his self-appointed role as Guardian of the Cosmos. The Doctor wishes to try and find some peace, however he's soon thrown into action when the trio find that the villagers are slowly being killed off. We then see the trio working with a washed-up actor named Edward Trevithick, who is well known for playing the lead character in the 1950s sci-fi show named Nightshade, to find and stop the killer. It turns out that the killer is an ancient sentience, simply known as the Sentience, that has lived inside the Earth focused under Crook Marsham. We learn that it feeds on human energy, however it can't feed on humans directly and needs to latch on to strong memories such as regret and desires. The Sentience would then create individuals from the memories and try to interact with the target. The stronger the belief in the memory was, the more powerful the copy was, and the easier the Sentience could feed. In the end, the Sentience is defeated when the Doctor tricks it into feeding off a supernova, which creates a black hole, and the Doctor traps it within said black hole. At the end of the story, the Doctor has been snapped out of his pensive mood, having been convinced by his companions to keep being himself, and so the trio return to the TARDIS. This story sees the Doctor being summoned to Earth by UNIT, led by Brigadier Winfred Bambera. She asks the Doctor to investigate the University of Advanced Education, as UNIT has detected traces of Artron energy from within the university. The story sees the Doctor taking on the disguise of a professor, with Rain as his assistant and Higgs as a student studying science, as they attempt to track down the source of the Artron energy. Further issues are raised when they discover old reports of students vanishing without a trace. After some investigating, the Doctor traces the source of the Artron energy to the university's Vice-Chancellor, who reveals herself to be the Rani. The Doctor discovers that the Rani has been kidnapping the most intelligent students and wiring their brains into a Gallifrey machine, which she wants to use to re-engineer chaos theory. So far, her results have had very little results. However, she now plans to complete her experiment by connecting the Doctor's mind to the machine. The story then relies on Rain and Higgs, who, with less knowledge than the Doctor, must find a way to defeat the Rani. The Rani is then eventually defeated when Rain and Higgs free the Doctor and her other subjects from the machine by programming a computer virus into it, which releases everyone from its control and implodes on itself. The Rani is then captured and imprisoned by UNIT, with the Doctor dematerialised in her TARDIS. The story then ends with the trio saying goodbye to Bambera before returning to the TARDIS. Season 29, ratings-wise, proved to be about as successful as Season 28. Whilst the overall opinion from fans was that the season wasn't anything special, with most of the season feeling like Season 28B, the general reception to the new stories were mostly positive. And so, with another notch under its belt, Doctor Who was greenlit for another year, 1993. the 30th anniversary.